For tonight's speeches, our students have conducted research, organized interviews, and participated in volunteer work, all in an effort to follow the TEDx motto of having an idea worth spreading. Tonight you will hear the ideas that we think are worth spreading as we dive into the topic, exploring perspectives, insights from the field. We hope you enjoy the variety of speeches from our presenters this year. Please sit back, relax, and welcome Soonmin Perlman presenting What You Think, You Become, my attempt to eliminate stress.
It is the night before the math test. You open the study guide. You have no idea how to solve any of the problems. You panic and envision your parents scolding you after your grade in Genesis drops from an A to a D. You can't stop worrying about failing. You call your closest friends for advice on how to chill out. Friend 1 recommends that you play your favorite sport and get exercise. Friend 2 recommends that the best way to get rid of your stress is to eat your favorite food and watch TV. Which friend recommended the best advice? Which technique will eliminate your stress? And what if going on a walk and eating ice cream doesn't work? After interviewing a therapist, maintaining a stress-free routine that turned out to be anything but stress-free, and ultimately stumbling on an unlikely path, I came to the conclusion that eliminating stress is dependent on my perspective. No strategy from any article or tip from any peer will effectively eliminate stress. Overcoming stress is dependent on your perception of yourself within the world. I started my journey by reaching out to a therapist, Dr. Willis, who works here at Downtown Summit. I had prepared a list of questions to ask her about stress, which is something that I struggle with on a daily basis. I found out that in order to get rid of stress, I needed to understand what causes it. Dr. Willis explained to me that some psychologists perceive stress as the process in which we perceive and respond to certain events, or stressors that we view as challenging or threatening. It is more a reaction. Identifying and accepting the change in our lives will help reduce stress, since change prompts stress. Dr. Willis also told me about various types of therapies, such as aromatherapy, and other methods to get rid of stress. She also mentioned creating a routine, and told me that a beneficial routine consists of a healthy diet, exercise, sleeping the right amount each night, and maintaining good hygiene. A couple weeks later, I'd started and created the routine. I woke up at 6:30, ate breakfast 20 minutes later, ate a salad for lunch at 11:35, and dinner at 6:30. Every night, without fail, I made sure I was in bed by 9. I also made sure to exercise every day. On the first day for lunch, I bought a salad and I stared at it for a while. I debated how much dressing to put on it. If I put too little dressing, then the salad would taste like the salads my dad forces me to eat for dinner. But if I put too much dressing, then I would just be eating a bowl of dressing and not salad, which would defeat the whole purpose of eating healthy. Before I knew it, I started to stress over the very routine that was designed to get rid of my stress. I also continued to doubt myself over eating the right foods. Imagine second-guessing yourself over eating an apple and wondering if it was the right size, right texture, and right time to eat this apple. That was how I felt over every aspect of my routine. Towards the end of the 2 weeks, I wasn't sure if I got rid of some stress or increased my stress levels. Dr. Willis had also recommended aromatherapy. She specifically mentioned that the scent of peppermint can impact mood, which can help with motivation. Considering this, I used peppermint essential oil while practicing something that I'm supposed to do every day but refuse to do, learning Hebrew. The smoke from the diffuser quickly spread across my room, making my room smell like peppermint and my glasses blurry. Other than the smell and the fog, nothing really happened. I was getting frustrated. I wondered if the whole essential oil thing was just a gimmick. But if aromatherapy has no benefits, then why would a licensed therapist recommend it? According to Scientific American, the other possible benefits of essential oils are still inconclusive. If there is no definite science behind aromatherapy, then why does it help relieve stress for some? But it didn't work for me? My experience using the scent diffuser reminded me of the routine. Both techniques were not helpful, even though I 100% thought they would be. It had to be my fault for why none of these techniques were working, right? Throughout my own experience, I found that I wasn't able to get past my own negative thoughts. And if I don't have trust in myself, how can I have trust in my own actions and choices? Just as I was about to throw my hands up in the air and retreat to a giant bowl of ice cream and trade Hebrew for the most recent episode of Survivor, I stumbled upon a strategy by reading a book my dad had bought me years ago. Wide Awake, A Buddhist Guide for Teens by Diana Winston. For the longest time, I didn't get any further than the first page. I had already considered that my mindset was partially responsible for the poor results on the routine, and I knew that Buddhism has a lot to do with mindset. So I decided to give the book a chance, and I started reading and reading and reading. Through the book, I discovered the Noble Eightfold Path, the path to enlightenment. I realized that the path can be applied to daily life, and the way we understand perspective and its relationship with stress. As in the name, the Noble Eightfold Path features 8 steps. The first step, right view, immediately stood out to me. Right view, or right understanding, is where one comes to understand and face reality without any misconceptions about the world, themselves, and their relationships with others. If I had known of right view before starting my routine, I wouldn't have gave in to the negative thoughts, which led to failure. Similarly, the 6th step, right effort, emphasizes the importance of maintaining a positive state of mind. My negative mindset led me to doubt myself throughout the routine. If I were to use the teachings of right effort, I would have been more aware of my negative thoughts and would have tried to get rid of them to keep a positive perspective. Lastly, I followed the 8th step, right concentration, which is where one is supposed to meditate. I meditated for 5 to 10 minutes every morning and night to see if there were any improvements to my mindset. While I meditated for 5 to 10 minutes, I realized that oftentimes I get in my own way and get to myself with doubt. In order for me to see through a positive lens, I must face my own feelings. And sometimes it feels like the only purpose of my feelings is to discourage me. During my routine, I gave in to the negative thoughts, which led me from reaching the full potential of the routine I had created. The routine gave me an opportunity to get rid of my stress. But because of my mindset, I wasn't able to benefit from any of the useful aspects. Meditation allowed me to see that I feed my own feelings and make them more real and forceful. After loosely applying the Noble Eightfold Path to my response to stress, I understand that minimizing my stress is possible through keeping a healthy and positive mindset. The Noble Eightfold Path and meditation revealed that overcoming stress does not depend on a thing to do, or buy, or eat, or not buy, or not do. The routine I had created was a futile attempt to incorporate all the useful habits that are helpful to getting rid of stress. Though ultimately, it was useless, since I had no faith in myself. Meditation allowed me to wait out the negativity, to let it pass, to understand that I create the very negativity that holds me back. The aromatherapy experiment was a way to check the box of incorporating a stress tool. I had no confidence or patience within myself, and instead of asking myself why, I was looking for something outside of myself to bring relief. I was grasping for a solution, for some quick fix that would make me feel better. However, when I found the Noble Eightfold Path and used it to help me get rid of stress, I realized that my desire to find a solution outside of myself was related to my own self-doubt. Now that I've learned that I'm the creator of my own stress, and now that I've learned how to patiently let it pass, I'm finally ready to return to Dr. Lewis's office with clear-sighted attention. I'm ready to start over. And maybe this time, because I'm not so desperately and stressfully looking for a way out of myself, I will actually be able to apply some of her suggestions in a way that will allow me to be stress-free, or at least minimize my stress. To everyone here, please consider taking a moment to stop grasping for solutions. Reflect on your own outlook and attitude. After all, when it comes to stress and really any other challenge one might face, perspective is key. Thank you.
Thank you, Sun Min. Next, we have Adrija Adakari presenting a beautiful thing called vulnerability.
I had never thought of myself as a person needing sympathy or empathy, or any sort of emotional connection whatsoever. One of the most consistent compliments I receive from my friends is how well I console them when they're upset. Because I always say, well, that sucks, and move on. In truth, I resort to this empty response to my friends' issues because I'm not very good at exploring problems I'm not comfortable with. However, my culture prides itself on the beauty of learning new things and broadening one's horizons beyond just the sand beneath one's feet. To enlighten my perspective, I was soon cued into the importance of vulnerability. Sharing my revelations with friends and family, we all agree. We need to become more vulnerable and embrace the discomfort that comes with putting ourselves out there. It was like a bubble had popped and left me with all these secrets about myself that had previously been inside a locked chest. And the key to opening that chest was vulnerability. Vulnerability changed my life and has the power to change yours too. When people think of vulnerability, they imagine themselves spilling all their secrets to a dark, hooded figure that will exploit them at the first chance. This concept is wrong. In fact, it is vulnerability that enables us to be seen as who we are by letting down guards. That is something that is essential should one want to make genuine connections throughout their lives. So, what exactly is vulnerability? According to dictionary.com, vulnerability is an openness to attack or willingness to show emotion. In other words, allowing one's weaknesses to be seen or known. It requires the specific will to not hide any emotion or thought from the other party. When you're talking about the rougher aspects of yourself, you set up the chance that the person you're speaking to will stab you in the back and run away with a dagger. Of course, this can happen, but there's a chance that it can bring you closer. There's a reason vulnerability is considered the origin of happiness, creativity, authenticity, and lastly, love. It is a place to build empathy. When you talk about yourself with others, you learn about the deeper aspects of each other, which leads to an openness to forgiveness and love. That's why your parents love you, even if your room is hardly cleaned or your laundry's all around the floor. They love and accept you for who you are. Unconditional love. In my school, there was an activity called Challenge Day, which in simple terms was a large session where students were given the space to be vulnerable. I didn't participate in it, and I wish that I did, but I know that if I had, I would have been terrified out of my wits to share anything of importance to complete strangers. During Challenge Day, barriers were broken down and lives were changed. Well, according to one of my friends. Students were encouraged to talk about burdensome secrets with the promise of no one else knowing. They were able to look past the people they thought they knew and look deeper into the surface. Everyone emerged from that day in different states, but my friend thought that everyone changed for the better. They had lighter hearts, more open eyes, and were more compassionate toward each other because you can never tell what a person's going through just by looking at them. One of the main activities of the day was the Crossing the Line activity. This was when students were asked personal questions meant to push emotional boundaries. My friend was unable to go into details with the information shared. What she did share, though, was that this step was the most difficult to manage. Many people shed tears, revisited dark memories, and faced their inner demons. Crossing the line wasn't just crossing a line. It was crossing into people's fears, worries, and past memories. The atmosphere was very supportive, which encouraged people to share more. Perhaps I would have benefited from it had I not been frightened to death like my friend was. She recommends sharing this activity with more people since it definitely drew complete strangers closer to each other. The most important part of this activity wasn't simply sharing these secrets, but changing one's view towards the world after this shared experience. Now that we know about the benefits of vulnerability, the question is, how do we become more vulnerable? These tried and true tips can be applied anywhere, at school, work, to the random shop work at the store you frequent. Number 1, don't try to be something you're not. Admit your weaknesses. Just by saying that you're bad at something instead of covering it up with a swagger is a huge step to making genuine connections. Don't learn from others and try to be better. This admittance will be seen as a sign of confidence and you will be respected for it. Number 2, take responsibility for your actions. Don't try to blame others, that's just wrong. By admitting to it, you are showing your faults, but believe me, you will emerge stronger because you took control of the situation and fixed the problem. Number 3, tell someone if they're pushing things too far or being hurtful. On the flip side, tell them how wonderful and amazing they are. By telling someone about your personal feelings towards them, you are completely bearing your souls to them. Minor exaggeration, but whatever. This is considered the ultimate act of vulnerability. Therapists are an excellent example. One thing about therapists that make people agree to have them is the fact that they are a complete stranger. They don't know anyone in your life and are focused on you and you only, something that is appreciated by many. If you're not yet ready to open up to a close person, I recommend a therapist. Follow these tips and you'll find yourself having a lot more friends with actual bonds. Believe it or not, I wasn't very good at being vulnerable either. It was only after I was faced with the results of a meaningful conversation with a friend that I decided it was high time for me to learn how to express my emotions more. Real people were too scary, so I got the next best thing, a diary. In fact, it might have even been a better thing. Considering that a diary consists of pieces of paper, it's not like it has feelings or can make a judgment about me. I'd be able to write whatever I wanted without any fear of rejection. From there, I'd be able to have beautiful, one-sided, vulnerable, and life-changing conversations. In theory, it was perfect. In practice, not so much. Number 1, there was a reasonable fear of having other people read my diary. My parents were wonderful and supportive, promising not to read a letter of it. However, there was the unreasonable fear of having a criminal break my window, waltz in, steal my diary, and run off to a faraway land where they can exploit all my secrets. Considering that a diary doesn't have a lock, it can happen. Also, I think Tom Riddle's diary from Harry Potter sort of scared me. It was mostly the privacy part that I had problems with. Writing everything down on a piece of paper, it was terrifying. The first couple of times I did this, I stuck to superficial thoughts. Nothing too deep, just what I did in school that day and upcoming events. The truth was that I was scared. I was so terrified of the possible consequences that could arise that I didn't use my diary like I'd intended to. Over time, however, the diary evolved in some sort of confider for me. Whenever I was particularly upset, my first thought was that I need to write in my diary. And I felt so much better after doing so, like I was releasing all my emotions and allowing them to blend into the paper. From there, I started to write about more personal things until it started sounding like my own thoughts instead of some bleached copy of them. That way, I was practicing being vulnerable and embracing my true self, which allowed me to reach some sort of equilibrium with myself. Diary writing was an amazing experience that I grew from. Many people use diaries to help them mentally, and I will definitely continue it as my personal therapy. I still haven't ventured into opening up to a real person yet, though I am progressing. The diary was the first step, though I will soon advance. The path to becoming vulnerable is not one to be rushed. It takes a lot of courage to bare yourself like that, but that courage will stay with you once you realize that you are loved no matter what your faults may be. There can be real risks to becoming vulnerable, and there is the pain that comes with losing someone close to you because they do not accept you for who you are. It's risky, no doubt about it, but are you willing to take the risk and reap the rewards? It's all up to you. Thank you.
Great job, Adrija. Our next presenter is Sarah Borkar with the benefits of hands-on learning.
Think to yourself the last time you learned something. It could be a fact, a lesson, or even an entire skill. Now, think about how you learned this. Was it from a video? Was it while you were in school? Was it from a book? Most of the time, where I'm supposed to learn something, I'm in a classroom, staring at a whiteboard. I quickly learned that for me, this isn't the best way to learn. Instead, I learn best by doing something interactive or hands-on. But how can hands-on learning be beneficial for you? Studies show that hands-on learning improves focus, increases the retention of new information, and can help you discover new things about yourself. Let's start by talking about the place I spend the most time in, school. After navigating my way through the hallways, trying not to get pushed around like a punching bag, I found my way to science class. Feeling exhausted, having experienced countless assignments and tests that day, I noticed my classmates seemed to feel the same way as well. The teacher's words turned into a blur to my ears, and I couldn't comprehend what she was saying at all. She began the lesson on the board, instructing the class to take notes. My mind drifts into space. I'm sure many of you have been in a similar situation. However, she then transitioned from notes to instructions. What caught my attention was when she mentioned the word lab. Then I became all ears. We were beginning a group project in which we had to construct a greenhouse, in which we had to keep a few plants alive inside. I started to feel excited. After being assigned our group members, we were told to get to work. The previous monotonous and apathetic classroom transformed into a fun, lively learning environment for everyone there. I and several others also found ourselves genuinely learning the material, because not only were we learning how to effectively construct a greenhouse, but we were also genuinely learning our terms in science involved with the project. My learning experience keeps getting better each minute. I was what you would call in the zone, because I was focused. Being focused allowed me to be alert and helped me take in all the information I need to be learning. I took in my information clearly and concisely, and I left my classroom that day knowing that I understood the material. This confirms my first point, that hands-on learning improves focus. When we are physically engaged in an activity, it requires a more active method of learning, thus requiring more focus. When looking at retention rates of other presentation styles versus hands-on learning, studies show that learners only retain their information at a rate of 5% when passively interactive with learning. For example, lectures or even reading. On the other hand, people who participate in hands-on activities retain their information at a rate of 75%. When listening to someone speak for a long time in an uninteresting environment, such as an uneventful classroom, it tends to get a little boring, and many students focus on the clock rather than paying attention. So, what is the science behind this? When learning, a crucial part of it is our retention rates and whether or not we are focused. A primary part in our brain that deals with this is the amygdala. The amygdala is often in control of our emotions. It separates our experiences into positive and negative ones. When the amygdala encounters boring information, the brain ignores it and directs its attention to something of more interest. However, despite the experience being the same, despite the environment being the same, the experience depends on the activity you are actively doing. When involving yourself in something interactive, you are more alert and truly engaged in what you are doing. Your brain views this as a positive experience. Instead of ignoring what you are doing, your brain directs its focus to the activity you are actively doing, and it allows for a clear mind and more sustained learning. Not only do hands-on experiences allow you to grasp the information you are working with, both literally and figuratively, but it provides you with a window into how you learn and how you react in certain situations. They also teach you skills that will transcend into other areas of your lives. For example, in another experience, Hands-on learning taught me so much about myself. For the past few months, I've been trying to get into cooking. While there was a lot of passion in my dishes, there was a lot of mistakes. So I tried to focus on my flavor and presentation each time I made a dish. However, with every new activity comes self-doubt. Each time I tried to take a risk, a message shot through my mind, saying that I couldn't do it, that I would fail and mess up. Each time I made a mistake, it would lower my self-confidence till I had no faith in my dish at all. Sometimes I contemplated giving up because I was just so frustrated with my mistakes. However, as I began to practice on aspects of my dishes more and more, cooking began to teach me a few things. First, it taught me to be patient and to not give up, even when I seemed to have messed up the dish. While I was cooking, I got frustrated a lot with my mistakes, and a lot of the time that led to my errors. Each time I was patient, I slowly gained more confidence. Later on, I took a risk to try other cuisines that I'd never even known about before. Usually what I would do is find a country I don't know a lot about and just make a dish from there. A big turning point in my cooking was when I made a dish called æbleskiver from Denmark, a popular snack there. It was the first dish, in my opinion, that I had succeeded in making a delicious snack. Because of this, a rush swirled through me, and I began to feel much more confident while cooking. The more faith I had in my food, the more it reflected in the final product. Another thing that cooking taught me was to be neat in my workspace. Now, I am certainly not an organized person, and I think if you see my old school folder, you'll see why. While I was making my dishes, there were tools scattered across, napkins on the table, and messy pots and pans behind me. I quickly realized that in order to produce great dishes, I had to keep myself organized. I started to practice on my organization skills more and more, and it gave me not only a clear space to work, but a clear mind as well. Because I was able to do everything with a sense of independence and interact with my materials, I had the ability to problem solve and fix all my mistakes in my dishes without needing assistance from anyone. Things I learned while cooking are things that I will take with me for the rest of my life. Things that I used to struggle with in the past, such as patience or neatness, suddenly became a habit for me. It opened my eyes and made me realize just how important hands-on learning could be. Many children struggle with learning, but there are solutions that we can help implement to make sure that no one falls behind. While learning, though traditional methods have been around for a long time, they won't work for everyone. Simply reflecting on an experience in my science class is an evident demonstration of how hands-on learning can transform an environment and how students feel about learning. We must move forward, change, and adapt so that everyone can learn. Hands-on learning can offer so much and can teach you so much about yourself, and in the long run will help you greatly. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Up next is Struggling to Socialize, presented by Ayana Hubert.
It's your first day at a new school. You have butterflies in your stomach. You walk into your first class and see in big, bold letters, icebreakers. You know you have to introduce or get to know yourself to those foreign faces in your class. You're forced to socialize. Let's face it, we've all been in that situation before and have likely felt the same feelings about it. This year, my goal was to learn about the field of architectural design. As a kid, I loved building houses, and I always wondered how you can build a structure from the ground up. However, as I started my fieldwork, I realized it would involve me interviewing people in their environment, people I've never met before. This scared me because I get nervous talking to people I've never met before. I walked into my first interview with butterflies in my stomach and stayed quiet for some time. My mom mainly did the talking at first. Here I was with Mr. Hochstein, an architectural designer who designs homes. After some time, I realized I should probably be doing the talking, and not my mom. I knew I had a few key questions that would get the conversation going, and once I did, I was comfortable laughing and learning with him. This prepared me for my next interview, where I interviewed Miss Anderson, a city zoning officer who has dedicated 34 years of her service to the Summit community and who is in the audience tonight. Going back to what I said, I started to get nervous, but realized that the only way to overcome my fear of struggling to socialize is to be confident, and I did just that. Originally, this year, I was going to focus my presentation on struggling to socialize, but realized that during those interviews, I was scared. What if something went wrong? Or I didn't know what to say. Take a moment and think. Can you recall this struggling to socialize happening to you? Or someone you know? That feeling of helplessness or just wanting to be left alone. Today, we will explore 2 of the main reasons why people struggle to socialize and how we can overcome those social anxieties. Isn't it ironic, as we're expected to socialize all the time? Whether meeting new people, performing in front of people, interviewing people, or maybe just speaking to you all today. Yes, really. All these examples clearly show the need for face-to-face interaction in our daily lives. Did you know about the 7-38-55% rule? 7% of all communication is done verbally, whereas the nonverbal component of our daily lives, such as the tonality of our voice, makes up 38%, and 55% is done through our body language and facial expressions. Now, imagine this and add on another form of communication that we can't ignore. Yes, the impact of technology. This reliance on technology can be seen every day. So you see, technology, along with struggling to socialize, is only making the situation worse. Imagine this. In the morning, you wake up to the sound of your phone alarm. The minute you hold that phone, you start to check your mail, text, or scroll on Instagram. Then, at work or in class, you're on screens all day. And by the time you get home, you're back on that screen, on a call, or maybe just watching your favorite social media influencer on TikTok. You don't really socialize as much when you're on screens all day. All this before getting back to bed and setting that phone alarm for the next morning. That's your day. Screens, screens, and screens. And let's face it, our parents scream, scream, scream to get us off our phones. Take a moment and think. How many of you have your phones in your hands? If so, please raise your hands. Thank you. Now, let's face it, when we're in a conversation, we immediately lose focus of the conversation happening in front of us to go see what's on our phone. Technology is one of the main reasons why people struggle to socialize and will hide behind screens instead. A second reason is people can just fear standing up in crowds because they think they'll get criticized or humiliated. Actually, a common fear of mine. This leads me to the question, what makes people so nervous? Well, people who have an overreactive amygdala, which is within your brain, that controls your emotions and your emotional memory, may have a heightened fear response, causing increased anxiety in social situations, especially related to fear and stress. Some people, social anxiety may be a learned behavior. For example, people can just fear standing up in crowds. For American adults, we're spending 30% less time socializing than we did just 20 years ago. And for American teens, the decline is over 45%. Time and time again, research has shown that if one person is using any electronic device during a particular time period, is less likely to engage in face-to-face interactions because one time invested in communication is no longer available in another. Yes, it's true, unfortunately. Ever since COVID-19, people have been more dependent on their phones since there was no school. Everything was on computers or phones. However, even though technology has made it harder for people to socialize, people can just feel pressured in ways they don't feel ready for, being criticized or humiliated or having other fears and worries. On a personal level, what I'd not tell you is that I'm a twin. Yes, really, it's not fun, believe me. I'm joking. Or am I? I have to be honest, sir. She's in the audience. Going back to what I said, I'm the only introvert in my family, and believe me when I tell you, they're all extroverts. Now, that's hard for someone like me. I had to put myself out of my comfort zone, otherwise I wouldn't be standing here today, presenting to you all. How did I get there, you may ask? Well, the key was to overcome the fear and embrace it. I practiced in front of my parents' friends. I volunteered, which involved me interacting with strangers. I even did it in front of my cat. Yes, really, she definitely wasn't listening, and she definitely was not sleeping, but that's okay. More recently, though, being involved in stage management for the school shows with Mrs. Storr has really helped me evolve my self-confidence, as well as speaking to you all today. Yes, really. The benefit of socializing is that you can increase your self-esteem, improve relationships, and overall expand your social networks. Are you ready to put yourself out there? Take on that challenge? The challenge is yours. Thank you.
Great job, Ayana. Our next presenter is Samdeep Nath with Discovering the New.
Hi guys, my name is Samdeep and I'm up here on a stage and you guys are down there in the audience. It's kind of neat up here, having a bunch of eyes staring into your very soul, just wondering what you're about to say next. It's kind of cool. Maybe you should try it. Speaking of trying something new, that's what I'm here to talk to you about. You guys must have tried something new at least once in your life, right? January is the month to restart. The new year, new resolutions, new habits. Sometimes people may take on ventures that might seem totally outside of the box. Take Veganuary, for instance, in which a record 500,000 people signed up to eat only vegan food this month. January is the month in which people around the world gear up for the start of something new and promptly fail soon after. Anyone who has hoped to change, mostly for the better, knows just how hard trying a new thing is, whether it's that first day at the gym, that first book you want to read, or that first healthy meal you swore to cook at home. Tonight, we will explore trying all these new things. According to organizational behavior researcher Keith Rawlag, for much of human history, trying new things is very dangerous. People were seen as inadequate, lower than, by their peers if they tried something new and failed. And there's like a 100% chance that if you try something new, you are definitely going to fail. And you need to embrace that. That is the first hurdle that you need to overcome in order to try something new. Once you overcome this first barrier, you have to be mindful of the obstacles along the way. For example, I participate in this thing called Stage Band. It is a select music group where I auditioned to play piano. I got in, but there was a little problem. I was one of 3 pianists who got in, but there were only 2 pianos. And I was the 3rd guy with no piano. Like, why me? And therefore, they gave me this thing called the vibraphone. It's like a kind of a piano, but you use sticks to hit the notes. It's like playing piano, but with hooks for hands. It is really, really hard to do. Now, I was really excited to try this thing out at first, but my excitement quickly turned to frustration as I couldn't hit a single note. Well, either I mixed up notes, or I hit like 2 notes at a time, or I flat out just hit the empty spaces, and that got me frustrated. I was not feeling it. So, in order to overcome this frustration, I made better goals for myself. I made sure that the goals that I set up were specific and not too numerous. Those were SMART goals. SMART goals stand for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. With this criteria for making my goals, I was able to use the correct goal setting strategies and not be one of those poor souls who tried something and got crushed afterward. Not only does trying something new require SMART goals, it requires perseverance and grit. For example, I did this thing called Taekwondo when I was around 4 to 9. That's me. You see the resemblance? At first, I was really excited to try out Taekwondo, but later on, I got extremely devastated by this. I was and still am skinny, so I am not the strongest person out there. And every day I went there, I got kicked, punched, in places you don't want to know. And after around a year of practicing, adapting, I was able to change my fighting style. I didn't go in with brute force, I avoided. And that got me really, really far. As far to my black belt test that I took when I was 9. During a black belt test, I had to break a cinder block with my bare hands. Now that's kind of unfair, because I was 9 at that time, and the cinder block weighed more than me. And I couldn't avoid this. This was something I had to go all in with. And I kept on punching and punching, but I couldn't do it. I was too weak. And that was the hard truth. I was unable to do this. But with my masters, seeing how much work and time I put in, they gave me a second chance. They let me kick the cinder block. And you bet I smashed that thing right into the ground, and I felt amazing about it afterward. In conclusion, trying something new is a game of patience. You must be prepared to do it in stages and never lose your resolve. If you follow SMART goals when doing something new, have perseverance, and have grit, then you are going to stick with it for eternity. Thank you.
Thank you, Samdeep. Next, we have Maya Tung presenting Banned Books, A Battle Worth Waging.
I never realized that people can view books as weapons. For me, books are voices that allow me to hear the world. No judgment, only the patience to allow me to try my way to interpret the world. I can marvel at the simplest thing without having to worry about anyone else. They provide me with a peace of mind that I can try my way, at my pace, guiding me on paths to discover life in ways I never imagined. Every journey is different, making me feel alive. Books can make you run and never stop until you need to feel that passion again. a roller coaster, meant to make you hold on until the end. A laugh, meant to make you smile. Or the cry, letting you find that hopeful ending you've been waiting for. The power in books is their power to be viewed as so many different things for whoever may need it, whenever they need it. That's why some people are viewing them as ways to poison people's beliefs and don't want to let anyone have them. But books are important on people's journey of discovery. Sometimes the squeaky wheels of society choose to stall and are afraid of the new ideas emerging from different books. But they do not have to fear. Controversial issues don't have to be pushed to the sidelines for fear of conflict. Instead, they must be welcomed to find understanding. No matter what, it is all readers' right to have access to quality, thought-provoking, and diverse literature that lets them explore themselves and the world around them. Reading is highly useful in school and in life. Even novels filled with no educational value let kids learn. Shakespeare to comics. Anybody who reads regularly has a high vocabulary. It also helps their performance in school, as reading is exercise for the brain. The activity forces it to participate, to understand the message clearly. Studies have also shown that reading reduces anxiety and stress that is always in life. Books of any type challenge us to push past our mental comfort zones, but they take so much time in this evolving world. With technology, reading is becoming a dead art to my generation. Kids don't want to waste time looking at classics. They want stories that they can connect to. Many students have required reading, while the books students want to read are becoming a luxury. For many students, there is little to no representation for them in impactful novels, while sometimes students don't even want to see themselves in the books they read. They want stories that let them step into other shoes, take a trip to a new world that they've never seen before, and see the other side like they've never had it. But oftentimes, these are the books that are censored, and students lose that chance to experience something new or foreign to them in a special way. This predicament leaves many without the desire to read. It is clear that the joy of reading is almost dead. For many students, they are unable to thrive in school due to the pressure to choose the right books. Adults fear that in certain novels, kids will come across controversial, mature issues that they are not ready for, while students are encountering these topics every day. From the news to social media to popular celebrities to even their own friends, these sources inform students about what's happening in the world, whether or not they're ready to hear it sometimes. Some types of entertainment are simply too financially powerful or too unpredictable to be controlled. Books are the easiest way in children's lives to exert control. People must ask themselves, though, whether they want a child learning about these sensitive issues through a safe, educated book or a rash media post. Books allow kids the space, time, and judgment-free zone to mull over topics that shake them to their cores. They do not exist to tell a person what to think. Instead, they exist to make them think, to make them question the world and wonder about new things. Rather than being burdened by the news of these issues, books break down barriers, open new doors, and assure struggling kids that they are not alone. Even if someone is not ready for a particular book yet, they are always there waiting for them whenever they may need it. The truth is, different people feel uncomfortable about different books. For one, a book about addiction could be triggering for someone dealing with it in their family, while another will enjoy the plot about the current issue. Both reactions are perfectly acceptable. A librarian's job is to get the right book into the right person's hand. This process is being threatened every day. For example, books that feature LGBTQIA+ characters are often targeted. This book is Gay by Juno Dawson is a nonfiction book on sexuality. It is meant to make everyone confident about who they are and their identity. Banned in 2023, the beginning of its challenges started in 2016 when certain parents forced libraries to remove the book from the shelves as they disliked that their children were learning about the LGBTQI community. Giving children the belief that they're alone in their challenges, queer youth without the easy access to role models in books feel like outsiders. But they're not the only ones. Protagonists of color are also being pulled from the shelves. The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas features African-American 16-year-old Star as she watches her childhood friend Khalil die at the hands of an officer. He was unarmed. Readers follow her journey as she fights for justice for him. I was deeply impacted when reading this book, as it taught me the dangerous cost of assumptions. But many people had a different view and are wary of the sensitive issues confronted in the novel. When students enter a library, they're looking for books that they will enjoy. Sometimes those books go against the wishes of their parents, who feel their control slipping away on their child's journey as they grow. Some parents speak out in rage and choose to blame the libraries. So, with no true person being at fault, you can say, librarians can be arrested or fired for simply sharing needed books. But they are not the ones that are hit the hardest. There is a belief for an author, if their book is banned, it's a badge of honor, of accomplishment. The truth is, it could be the end of their career. For a few lucky authors, book banning propels their cause to national attention. The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas shows that book banning can actually be beneficial sometimes. Star's struggles allow readers to see the ugly truth about racism in the justice system. The author claims that whenever the book is banned, sales have actually increased. This phenomenon is not the case for the most. There are simply too many books being banned for each novel to be immortalized. 1,557 books were banned just last year, an all-time new high. So some author statements are drying up in the wind, as others receive credit, while some are facing the consequences. Call Me Max by Kyle Lukoff, a book about a transgender boy, was banned by parents. Lukoff received no offers for contracts, and publishers were afraid to give him a job. You see, publishers note banned books and fear that by taking risks with those authors, they will lose money, deterring authors from writing these important stories. If authors aren't including underrepresented parties in their stories, then kids will feel limited in their possibilities. Everyone, from the authors who write the books to the publishers who share them with the world, to the librarians who give them to the needed kids, to the children who learn to live by reading, are harmed. People must provide students with what they want to read. Some important things to keep in mind. The enjoyment of reading has been leached out slowly over the years through tests. To bring back some fun, start with books students want to read. With no books in the libraries or the classrooms they go to, students lose the love of reading. They have to be aware that what they want is in those classrooms. Next, schools have to encourage diversity. They should be aware of everyone in their communities. They should make sure that a child has the chance to see themselves in a book of as many possible genres. In a National Education Association paper, a librarian from Texas explained that you just have to buy the books they want. It's their library. They have the power to choose. Finally, schools have to provide students with time to read books they enjoy. With the pressure of academics, reading is becoming a lost habit. With no time to pursue a good book, students lose the love of reading. By providing students with time in class to read books they enjoy, students earn the chance to grow and soak up all the benefits. Reading is a fundamental part of our lives. It strengthens our minds, helps us in our job, and pushes us to see the world in creative ways. Taking in new messages, seeing different perspectives, we earn the chance to explore at our own pace. As people, we connect through stories. By working to protect reading and the world it opens, encourage visibility, and diversity representation, we will make sure that the books that help us grow into the people we are will never die. Thank you.
Wonderful, Maya. Our next presenter is Daniel Levington with Why Teaching is Undervalued.
Teaching is easy. Imagine being able to wake up a few minutes early, 7:30, and be home by 3. Only 7 hours of work. All you have to do is read the same PowerPoint to some kids. Furthermore, you have no work during the summer, plus 2 weeks of paid built-in vacation time. You're going to work less than 50% of the year. In fact, this job will be so easy that you don't even have to show up. Call in sick and a substitute will be there to replace you, teaching the lesson that the state made for you in advance. However, when I dove into the world of teaching, interviewing a variety of teachers, I found that not only is this fever dream a lie, but teaching has many immense challenges. They work incredibly hard to give your kids the best education possible, and yet society does not value it at all. We all have a favorite teacher, the one that just sticked with you forever. You were always excited to walk into their classroom, waiting for the amazing lesson that was sure to unfold. They not only helped you connect to their subject, but with themselves on a deeper level. I've had a few teachers like this, who have truly helped me broaden my horizons, across topics I would have never thought to explore otherwise. What kind of middle school student gets excited to learn about meiosis and mitosis, or DNA replication, or the expansion of the United States? Apparently, me, all because of teachers. Teachers have been so influential in my life that now I would like to continue that wonderful tradition and become a teacher myself. So I started by interviewing different teachers. What I found is that teaching has many different challenges. The teachers agreed that their greatest challenges came during the planning stage, creating, tailoring, and individualizing lessons for individual classes. They also struggled to create lessons that connect to the students, bringing the lesson closer to home. even through the summer, they're working on lessons. And yet, they don't get paid for any of this overtime work. The teachers say that people tend to focus on their time off, when in reality, they're constantly attending meetings, forming plans for class, and balancing the separate influences of administration, parents, students, other teachers, and the broader, more general public. When hearing the difficulties of teachers, you have to ask why. If teaching is so difficult, why would anyone want to become a teacher? The answer is that they truly love watching students progress throughout the year. The point of teaching for most is not to make money, but rather to guide students through the process of learning. It's just like any other profession in which you're growing a team. In this case, a team of curious kids. And teachers love watching their students thrive and connect ideas, what some would call an aha moment. The appeal of teaching is to help students find their passion, in and out of the classroom. But this is not a clear answer. As the teachers agreed, they could have never imagined many of the difficulties of teaching back when they were kids. So when one of the teachers offered to let me teach a class, I pounced on the opportunity. I figured that I should try and experience what being a teacher is like, especially after hearing all this. I quickly found that I wasn't just teaching the class. I would have to create my own presentation, my own notes, my own assignments, and I would have to grade those assignments. It was truly an eye-opening experience, being a teacher for the first time. Firstly, the planning needed beforehand was much more time-consuming than I had ever imagined. Creating an assignment that took the students just 20 minutes to complete took me hours. Grading 20 assignments also took multiple hours. In addition, to compound these difficulties for real teachers, none of this work can be done during school hours, so all those breaks don't look so long, do they? And all this work I did excludes tailoring for 5 individual classes and balancing the separate influences of parents, students, and administration that real teachers face. However, I did see some of the positives that teachers see. These came in the form of those aha moments I mentioned earlier. Watching the moment when the students finally understood the lesson was incredibly rewarding. The result of all my effort came to a single point where my effort met reward. And yet, the preparation needed beforehand was still immense compared to the small reward. The challenges of actually teaching involved presenting to a room of judgy 11-year-olds. Before I walked into class, I gave myself a bit of a pep talk, reminding myself that I prepared for this moment. And yet when I walked in, it all went away. The intimidation I experienced in that moment was unmatched by any presentation, essay, or test I have ever taken. This may have been due to me being a new teacher, but when I walked into class, it felt like they were looking me up and down, figuring out who I was. I didn't want to be a mean or strict teacher, but I also wanted them to understand the lesson that I worked so hard to convey. That in itself was a challenge, as connecting an idea such as figurative language to their daily lives was difficult. Unfortunately, according to teachers, all this secret behind-the-scenes work often goes unnoticed. 80 to 100% of teachers, according to numerous surveys, felt that their work was undervalued, unappreciated, or unrecognized. The reason for this negativity towards teachers is shocking. It's a cycle that begins when teachers face the brunt of public criticism, rather than the government. This is why teaching is often seen as an undesirable job. This criticism and undesirability leads to fewer teachers. In the newspaper, The Morning Call, Tanya Garcia of the Department of Education spoke about how there's been a 66% drop in teachers in just the last decade. This means that states have to lower requirements in order to fill classrooms, as politicians want a quick boost of teachers in order to win over voters. For example, just a few months ago, on November 28th, Governor Murphy instituted a law removing the requirement for teachers to pass a basic skills test. This creates teachers who are not adequately prepared for their jobs, who are then blamed for public concerns, and the cycle continues. However, the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's Teaching and Learning International Survey, found that only 2 nations have broken the cycle, creating high-quality, respected education. These 2 nations are Finland and Singapore. And since Finland is much more than a single city, I decided to dive into their education system, where I found that they have combated the teacher shortage in the opposite way of the United States. Their standards for teachers are much higher than anywhere else in the world. Some teachers begin training as early as the age of 13. All teachers require a master's degree and must become a student teacher first. Even after all of that, only 7% of applicants to teaching jobs in Helsinki are accepted. These high standards will lead to fewer teachers in the short term in the United States, as fewer people can apply, but in the long term, the cycle reverses, creating teachers who are high quality and respected, creating more quality teachers. Truly, the way out of this crisis, reversing teachers' underappreciation, is to raise standards. Though this is painful in the short term, which is why politicians won't make this change, it is better for your children's future. Now, this is where most people would urge you to vote for a specific political ideology or candidate. However, I accept that a scrawny 12-year-old will not change your political opinion. Therefore, the best way to support your teachers is by showing your appreciation. It doesn't have to be an expensive gift. It could just be a thoughtful card. For example, last year, I remembered a wonderful lesson that was taught to me on the principles of Buddhism by my social studies teacher. It was about how, according to Buddhists, you cannot suffer if you do not have desires. He connected this to us by telling us about a toy he wanted as a kid, the Dino Riders Diplodocus playset. He begged his mom for this toy, and when Christmas came around, there was a huge box on their tray. He was so excited to open it, but when he did, it was filled with socks. But in this, I saw an opportunity. I wrapped up a gift, wrote a heartfelt note, and on the last day of school, I gave it to him. He read the note, opened up the box, and what he saw was a Dino Riders Diplodocus playset. For $20, I not only made his day, but I proved that I paid attention to his lessons. The gift was so meaningful to him that he still has it in his office to this day. You are now part of an unfortunately small minority, those who know what teaching is truly like. So, what I urge you to do is think about your teachers and realize that those who do everything for your children deserve the same respect that other professions receive. Always remember that appreciation is the greatest gift you can ever give. Thank you.
And welcome to the stage, Shuhan Peng, presenting the Global Four-Leaf Clover Crisis.
The first time I caught a fish, I was 8 years old in the back lot of a ShopRite, fishing in an almost dry pond. I waddled around in my glow-in-the-dark, light-up, see-from-space Skechers with my Hello Kitty fishing rod and a matching umbrella to boot, because why the heck not? It was sunny outside. In the middle of my third existential crisis, I felt a tug. Now, you gotta remember, I was 8 years old. My life motto was, when in doubt, forget about the reel on your fishing rod. So, that's exactly what I did. I pulled with all my might, muddying my shoes, scraping my beloved Skechers against dirt and dead grass, and I reeled in a monster of a carp. I named him Fred. Fred ended up flopping back into the water because I was distracted by a shiny thing on the ground. How unlucky. The second time I caught a fish, I was 11 years old. I had ditched the Hello Kitty merch by then and had biked to a neighboring pond all by myself. I stood inches away from the water on top of the dam's wall, feeling like I was on top of the world, when I felt a pull. Deja vu. This time around, I was 11. So my life motto was, when in doubt, get pulled into the water by a fish. And that's exactly what I did, of course. The suddenness of the bite got to me, and I let a 6-pound bass drag me into the murky depths of the reservoir. It was not my greatest moment, believe me. How unlucky. Believe it or not, I actually managed to 1, not let go of the fishing rod, 2, crawl out of the water while still holding on to the fishing rod, and 3, become sopping wet,
but with the 6-pound fish who yanked me into the water. I named him John. He was quite the naughty one. The most recent time I caught a fish, I was 12 years old. At 12, my life motto was, when in doubt, forget about the rod itself and use your phone for half the time, because you're Generation Z and proud of it. So of course, that's exactly what I did, once again. I kept one hand on the rod and let the line just chill on the brink of the water. And then I felt a pull. I had miraculously caught a little fish by doing absolutely nothing. Go figure. I named him Todd and tried to take a picture, and during this time, Todd disappeared. Say it with me now. How unlucky. I'm ashamed to admit that I've caught a total of 3 fish in my lifespan. But time and time again, I spend hours upon hours casting and waiting. I test my luck for no apparent gain or reason, continuously coming to the conclusion that I'm just another poor, unfortunate soul. So how do I become lucky? First off, luck is just, as defined by Google, success or failure apparently brought on by random chance rather than through one's own actions. I'm here to talk about whether it truly is determinism, which is when your choices and outcomes are predetermined by the fates, or if we can really create our own luck. To understand luck, you have to get to the root of things. Why do we take risks? Fishing is not the only time I have taken a clear risk. Believe it or not, I have gambled before. Oh yeah, you bet. I recall it quite vividly. The first time I gambled, I was 13 years old and on a cruise ship, making me about 183% more reckless. So of course, I was more excited by the prospect of a slots machine than I was about the entire cruise vacation itself. I had brought a whopping $1 to the 7th floor slots area, and as I inserted that dollar into the nearest slots machine, heart pounding, I prayed for Mr. Washington to treat me well, and I hit the button. I had won, so I hit it again, and I won. With my luck, I ended up turning Senior George Washington into a nice, fresh Ulysses Grant. I skipped back to my cabin feeling like $1,000,000. And more than anything, I wanted to gamble again, because this time, when I took a risk, I got lucky. But let's just keep that little anecdote between you and I, shall we? Anyways, human life itself would be black and white without risk. I mean, imagine living a life where there are no chances of success or failure, just everlasting 9 to 5 days with a calculated plan for the rest of your life. How boring would that be? Humans are instinctively greedy, so taking risks is just a part of everyday life. Without risk, we just are not fulfilled. According to the National Institute of Health, we take risks because of overconfidence in our abilities or our luck. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, because those who tend to be risk takers also reap the reward. And just like risk taking, luck is different for everyone. So my way of interpreting luck probably varies quite a bit from yours. So let's talk about a scientific experiment conducted on luck, because science never lies. Or does it? In a study conducted by Richard Wiseman, 400 people who self-identified as either lucky or unlucky were given the same tests but had very different results. The study concluded that luck isn't because of a random chance or a magical opportunity, but it's rather something you make for yourself. In one experiment, the lucky and unlucky people were told to imagine that they were waiting in line to be served at a bank. Suddenly, an armed robber enters the bank, fires a singular shot, and it hits them in the arm. Those who self-identified as unlucky tended to say that this was enormously unlucky because it was just their bad luck that they were in the bank at the time of the robbery. In contrast, those who self-identified as Lucky spontaneously commented on how the situation could have been worse. One participant stated, "It's lucky because he could have been shot in the head. Also, you could sell the story to the news and make some money." So you see, lucky people tend to imagine how situations could be worse. This, in turn, helps them feel better about themselves and their lives. They feel, in a sense, lucky. And in doing so, this keeps their expectations about their future high, which increases the likelihood that they will continue to lead a lucky life. Though both groups recognized the risk, they perceived it differently, with lucky people being optimistic and unlucky people being pessimistic. Personality tests conducted in both this experiment and others have concluded that unlucky people are generally tense and anxious, which disrupts their ability to notice opportunities and try new things. So perhaps my excited and giddy attitude towards the slots machine was why I was able to get lucky. Ultimately, Wiseman's experiments revealed that lucky people create their own fortune by noticing chance opportunities, listening to their intuition, maintaining positive expectations, and adopting a resilient attitude. To test the conclusion of this experiment, I decided to go fishing. Once again. Yes, ladies and gents, I decided to set aside my Generation Z technology, go out and touch grass. In many forms, fishing is just like gambling. You invest a certain amount of money each month and hope that you don't have to live off a ramen noodle budget in college. Well, for me, maybe there was less risk involved, you could say. You see, I had what we would call a very generous spin factor. Thanks, Dad. Now, I decided to fish for 9 times throughout the entirety of what we'll call the luck trials. For the first trial, I took the good old rod and salmon eggs out to the creek, creating an opportunity for myself and becoming a martyr for couch potatoes. I was absolutely determined to reel in a beast and felt that the initial confidence I showed in myself would, in some way, manifest as a fish on my rod. There is always a particular feeling you get when you feel the first signs of a bite. No matter how small the fish is, the feeling, the rush of adrenaline, the frenzied reeling in of the line, this is the true excitement of fishing. Of course, I didn't get the honor to experience this prestigious moment. I went home at night empty-handed, and the raccoons laughed at me all the way back. I lost, but I had to try again. I craved the familiar exhilaration and knew that I would keep fishing, even if only for that feeling. The next 7 trials, though, were quite similar to the first. I had a feeling about trial number 9, though, so I convinced my kind screen time monitors to transport me down to the Delaware River. The first cast is always the most special one. You lay your hopes and dreams on it, and the moment you flip the wheel of the handle back after casting your line, you feel the excitement of the full day of fishing ahead of you. The first cast feeling always applies to me. Of course, there's also the 235th cast feeling. Ah, that's a familiar one, folks. This is called resilience. And by 4 o'clock on that non-fateful day, I was tired. Tired but hopeful. And somewhere around cast number 956, I felt a tug. And then 2, and then 3, and I reeled like the wind, and then there was nothing. No weight, no feeling, just nothing. I ended up reeling in a single stick that day. I named it Timothy, because why not? It was the only thing I had reeled in. I went into the luck test, pursuing a challenge of my luck and to fuel my crazed gambling addiction. I followed all proven steps to becoming a lucky person, and I failed. Rather miserably, grievously, and not to mention disastrously, I failed. And finally, I was forced to come to terms with the fact that I might just be an unlucky person because I didn't and couldn't summon a single fish for the life of me. In fact, the only thing I was lucky enough to be able to accomplish was delve deeper into my passion of fishing. Gambling. And at this point, everything seemed to point in the direction that I was unlucky. The odds were not ever in my favor, I guess. And so with that, I decided to conduct some additional research on luck, finding that evidence led me to believe that luck is just a number, a statistic, and a probability. I interviewed statistician Eric Fontes on his thoughts on luck. Hearing from a statistician really changed the way I perceive luck. Mr. Fontes said that luck is complicated because it relies on the theoretical and expected outcomes of the event, but statistical events can be unpredictable in the short term. Sometimes, when the expected outcome is favorable and an uncommon one occurs, it is deemed to be bad luck for an individual. Generally, he noted, luck implies that the result was somewhat different from what was expected when you look at the statistics and probability of the event occurring. The theoretical and expected probabilities can be estimated through thousands of simulations, and then the actual result can be calculated to determine if the event was lucky or unlucky. In the end, luck is just another number. We mere mortals are too weak to harness the luck. Luck can be calculated, and in math terms, it simply is just the unfavorable statistic. That positive mindset stuff was a bunch of baloney. The people in Wiseman's experiments had the circumstances that they did because of a number with a percentage sign after it. So, Google was right after all, because as referring back to the definition of luck, it just isn't really impacted by your actions, including your mindset and outlook. Let's continue to embrace our lucky charms and superstitions for the heck of it. Take risks, enjoy life, but always remember that it's pure random chance that will allow you to win the lottery. And math. Yep, your middle school math teacher was right. Math can be found everywhere. Unfortunately, math does play a large role. I never thought I would be saying this, but in the end, math is what makes the difference between a good day and a day so bad you wished you'd stayed in bed. And if all else fails, just blame it on the alignment of the planets, because let's face it, folks, Mercury is always in retrograde when things go wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Shuhan. Next is Learning from Failure Through Coding, presented by Arvind Rajan.
How many people have experienced failure and have gone frustrated many times? Maybe it has been received a bad grade, messed up one of your lines in the play, or stumbled a few words when reading the few couple pages of a book. We've all had something like this happen to us, but these events are not really failures, but they are setbacks. I, for one, have experienced many of these setbacks, especially with coding. After spending a lot of time learning to code, I would still fail in some coding quizzes which help test your knowledge on coding. Even after doing the tutorials of what to do, I would still have to try again and again just to solve the puzzle when it had been 30 minutes. I have gotten frustrated and angry with myself just because it has taken me so long just to solve the puzzle. But that was when I realized coding is an emotional roller coaster. Though I kept getting frustrated in myself because of coding, it did help me to keep learning about the puzzle and what it was trying to get me to do. It seemed like every time I didn't get it, but it did help me to keep trying on the puzzle and have closer hints into solving the problem. And that is why tonight I am here to tell you about the value of using failure as a motivating factor for success. Now, let me get this straight. People fear failure. According to Professor Martin Covington from Berkeley, failures make people question their self-worth. Most people will commonly quit the activity that they failed in and never seem to persevere or keep trying at it. This may be because people never had that motivation to persevere through a certain issue. This might also be because people have not been affected from one failure, an inconsistent amount of failures, but repeated failures is what throws people off. Now, according to another professor, Christian Neff, from the University of Texas, self-forgiveness is crucial to improvement through failures. And although self-forgiveness is critical to improvement, so is self-criticism, because that is what can make your failures into a success, whether big or small. When I was doing coding, I was intrigued. Looking at all these cool and fancy things, I thought I was tech savvy. But I realized I wasn't just learning how to be good at code, but I was also learning how to be good at failing. Now, the first thing that failure teaches is to think critically. Coding was a puzzle that was meant to trick you. It challenges and triggers your brain many, many times and in many different ways. It constantly keeps throwing you problem after problem that your initial reaction is, what the heck? Boulders after boulders you have to face each time, but it is really testing your brain to see if you can crack it. When I was doing coding, I figured out that if something wasn't working, it's not a good option to use. It seemed like coding was a multiple choice question, but not only I had to find the answers, I had to find the choices and keep eliminating them in order to find the correct answer. But that was when I also realized the obstacles I was facing aren't just specific to coding, but in fact, anytime you encounter something, you have to use critical thinking to find another approach. Now, the second lesson I learned from coding is to stay motivated through it. I learned from failures to stay motivated through it. So, how do we maintain this patience and motivation? That is to never let that emotion that triggers you or angers you overcome you. It is to keep on doing something constantly, again and again, until you get it. An important lesson I learned from coding is that if you try, you can make your failures into success, and you can make whatever you got wrong into whatever you got right. Now, the last lesson I learned from failing is that it makes you a better person. Now, though failures make you a better person, it doesn't automatically do that, like in a snap. It might take hours of refining yourself, if not years of refining yourself, just to fix one mistake. It'll have to take time and time again just to solve one question, like the one I previously mentioned that had to take me 30 minutes to do. Now, although you're better off meeting your new goal, acquiring a new skill, but you have now obtained a whole new subset of soft skills: grit, determination, and patience, amongst others. To conclude, failing in skills like coding is an emotional roller coaster, but it teaches us how to think critically, how to stay motivated, and how to become a better person, and also to overcome through our failures. Because overcoming through our failures is important, because that can manage our emotions, our highs and our lows, like in a roller coaster. I hope that tonight you have taken this experience that I shared with you and hope you use it for things you want to do in your lifetime. Thank you.
Great job, Arvind. Up next is The Difficulties of Language, presented by Zoe Smith.
How do you think you pronounce this? Well, you're wrong. It's pronounced dziewczynka. It's a Polish word that means girl. Many of you have likely had this experience when trying to learn a different language. And the fact of the matter is, all languages are hard to learn, and yet they are still very important. Learning languages can help expand the number of people you know, broadening your social circle, engaging in different cultures, and developing relationships with others. Not to mention, there are benefits for your brain as well. Learning languages can strengthen memory, speech, and sensory perception. Bilingual people are better at retaining lists, sequences, names, and directions. They're also more creative, perceptive, and can concentrate for longer. Yet, despite all these benefits, so few people are likely to push themselves to learn another language. Here's why. It's hard, but I'm here to tell you there is much more than just that. There are 4 main parts to the secret of language's difficulty. How your brain has changed over time, how languages have changed over time, the grammar and rules of a language, and how language learning has changed over time. And today, I'm going to put these 4 pieces of the puzzle together to truly uncover and understand a language's difficulty. Firstly, how your brain has changed over time. The part of your brain that deals with language is in the cerebrum, specifically Wernicke's and Broca's areas. A child's brain is like an IKEA package. All the materials are there, they're just not put together yet. And yet, a child's brain does a very good job at learning languages. But scientists aren't entirely sure why, since you can't really study babies. Because they're babies. They cry, need sleep every few hours, and can't understand basic instructions. But one thing we do know for sure is that repetition is required in language learning. Why do you think that is? Well, that's because memories aren't a material thing in your brain. They're a pattern of firing neurons. But the thing about neurons is that they can rewire. So if you don't use a skill or memory often enough, you can have to relearn it. This is why it is so important for kids to learn languages at an earlier age. Their neurons are still making connections at a higher rate than adults, meaning it'll be easier and take less time. This correlates to my experience of learning a language. I have an 171-day streak on Duolingo, and yet I can still only say a few simple sentences in Polish. This is compared to how much I can say in Mandarin, which I learned when I was younger. All this to say, as you age, the number of brain cells, or neurons you have, actually stays the same, which makes it difficult, but not impossible to learn different languages. And it's not only you that's changing. The languages themselves are changing. The European branch of language is only 5,000 years old. Language can be traced to over 100,000 years ago. One example of this is Old English, which is not the same language as modern English. When Shakespeare was writing Romeo and Juliet, he was not considering the fact that Romeo was acting sus. Some languages vary in complexity based on how they were derived. One example of this are the Romance languages, like French or Italian. Languages that are relatively easy to learn, and the top pick for every elementary school in the country. And yet, Polish is more related to English than they are. This could be because of a phenomenon known as borrow words, where one language borrows words from another. This can create words like though, thought, and throughout. Words that are confusing and seemingly make no sense because they were created for a different language with different rules. This shows languages are constantly evolving and constantly adding more words, whether it be shortening, borrowing, or just straight up creating new ones. For example, I bet the words your kids use every day didn't exist 20 years ago. There are around 6,500 living languages, and languages splinter off others all the time because of new words changing and being created. And the word for those changes is grammar. One example of this is the Chinese character system, where you use tones to indicate different words. See if you can hear the difference. There's shi, 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 and shi. That is why Chinese is considered to be one of, if not the most difficult language to learn in the world. The tone system adds a whole new level of difficulty and deters many from learning it. On the other hand, Polish uses a pretty similar system to English, but there are two main things that Polish does differently. First of all, it adds suffixes to the end of adjectives and verbs, like the Polish word movie. No, not the English movie. It's a Polish word, meaning to speak, as in I speak Polish. Well, that's its general term anyway, to be used with words like ona or on, he or she. There's also mówię, mówisz, mówią, mówimy, and mówicie, each having the same meaning, but being used with different pronouns. Then the second thing, grammatical gender, which gives every noun a gender, whether it be female, male, or neuter. That is a whole lot to remember. And finally, the last piece of the puzzle, how language learning has changed over the years. Back before the internet. I know, the horror. There were no online translators, no Duolingo, and dare I say it, no Dora the Explorer. To understand people who spoke different languages, you had to learn those languages. This is still an option today, of course, but now we have apps that help us learn languages, Google Translate, and videos on the internet. So you might be asking, why should I learn a language when I could just use Google Translate? Well, first of all, what if you didn't have your phone with you at the time? You might think that since everyone brings their phones with them everywhere, that wouldn't be an issue. I would just say that Google Translate isn't very accurate anyway, and oftentimes messes up the grammar, and just in general, isn't very good. For example, when I type I am currently singing and playing piano into Google Translate, it gives me 我现在一边唱歌一边弹钢琴, which is not correct. The correct translation would be 我正一边唱歌一边弹钢琴. While these sentences are very similar, they're still different, and that makes it incorrect. The fact of the matter is, translation tools are a short-term fix. Tape on something broken when you need glue. And learning languages can help you make a real connection and actually talk to people. So how would I recommend learning languages? Download a free language app like Duolingo, and be sure to practice a few minutes every day. And maybe even when you're ready, translate your phone language. Then after a little while, you'll know a good amount. Additionally, be sure to immerse yourself in the language. Attempt conversations with native speakers. Watch television shows with closed captioning in that language. And so much more. Remember the power of repetition I mentioned earlier. You might think, oh, I want to learn a language, but I don't know which one. How do I choose? My answer would be, well, what are you looking for? If you want a language to challenge you and be really difficult, maybe pick something that's far different from English. If you want something to be easier, maybe pick a language that's closer to English. And finally, if you want a language to be really, really useful, maybe pick something like Spanish, French, or even Mandarin. But no matter which language you choose, just know you're doing yourself and everyone around you a favor by choosing to spend time on yourself and choosing the glue instead of the tape. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Our next presenter is Ananya Ganti with Overthinking About Overthinking.
Let me be fully honest with you. I think a lot. My brain goes 10 times my speaking speed. Like right now, I'm thinking, why is the sky blue? Those curtains are really nice red. And why does every house or classroom have a different smelling air? I know for a fact I am not the only person who does this all the time. Overthinking is something that plagues us all, whether you do it frequently or not. Unfortunately for all of us, it's not very helpful either. In fact, it's probably the worst thing you could be doing for your mood. Regardless, we let our thoughts drive us, sometimes unknowingly, and this habit continues to eat up our joyfulness. Overthinking means exactly what it sounds like, dwelling on the same thoughts excessively. Although thinking is seen as positive, overthinking is not, because of the mental exhaustion that comes with it. This can be caused by many things, such as environmental factors, internal conflict, overload of information, and fear of the unknown. There is a philosophical conundrum known as Buridan's donkey, thought up by philosopher Jean Buridan. He describes a hungry donkey faced with two identical haystacks, both the same size, smell, and distance away from each other. They were both equally appetizing, and the donkey came to the conclusion that it wanted to eat both the haystacks, but was stuck on which one to eat first. And then it died of starvation. This is known as analysis paralysis, being too wrapped up in your analyzing to get a conclusion. Now, I'm not going to claim that the situation isn't exaggerated, but it can very well apply to all of us. The outcomes of eating either haystack first would have been the same thing, not dying of hunger. Say the donkey was instead given one haystack that tasted horrible and one haystack that tasted good, but they still looked identical. The worst case scenario would not have become eating the bad haystack, it would still be starving to death. Simple decisions are not worth overthinking, because the truly undesired result comes from when you don't make a decision at all. But Buridan's donkey is a simplified version of real problems. I am not telling you that you should shut off your brain entirely, but you should consider whether some things are worth dwelling on for so long. And once you start doing this, you realize how minuscule a few of the things we all overanalyze are. For example, earlier this year I picked up sewing. Unfortunately, I had absolutely no idea how or where to begin. I didn't consider it serious enough to learn from a real teacher, so I turned to the internet. Even though it provided me with resources, there were so many. I couldn't filter out the best ones for beginners. This led me to feel overwhelmed and kept me from sewing. I would practice the same basic stitches over and over and over again, not even knowing when I would get proficient enough to use them for a real project. And then I stopped altogether. While I enjoyed embroidery, I also avoided it because I wasn't learning anything useful enough. I kept worrying about how shaky my foundation was when I didn't even start building it in the first place. This is when I realized the hole I dug myself into. I was so excited to start learning to sew, but every time I opened up a tutorial, I was troubled by my thoughts. Some told me I was getting too far behind. Some told me I should stop altogether. And some told me to spend hours finding the perfect tutorial to procrastinate over. But then I found this glorious app that allowed me to create inspiration boards using other people's posts. Through this app, I found projects I would genuinely enjoy and embroidery patterns I couldn't resist trying. I would sit on my bed, pull up a reference, and embroider whatever I thought was mildly interesting. I didn't even care about the end product. I just got tired of overthinking it and wanted to actually start something. While we shouldn't be impulsive in every decision we make, there gets a point when rationalizing becomes irrational. It's okay to not have an end goal and just do things for fun. And in my case, this worked out well for me because embroidery helped me progress in my goal to learn sewing, even if it didn't go out exactly as planned. Even with an end goal, just taking the first step is much more important than worrying about starting in the perfect place. Suppose you too were in a situation where your thoughts stopped you from initiating a task. What if you never did start? Overthinking can also lead to being stuck in cycles. The thoughts do not go in a linear fashion, but they loop, which sends you back to square one instead of giving you an answer. So, If a cycle cannot be escaped by starting a task, how do we escape it? The ironic thing about overthinking is that people can turn it into a coping mechanism. To escape the cycle, it is crucial to find a way to take a break. Finally, after some practice with sewing and being more mindful about what was going on in my brain, sewing turned from something that induces overthinking to something that takes me away from my thoughts. It is important to find activities that help you get away from said brain rambling or the task that is causing you so much strife. Some things that also work are eating, sleeping, showering, or confiding in someone. There have been so many instances when I was bombarded with thoughts and got the clearest conclusion to them after talking to someone or taking a nap. Try multiple things until you find something that makes you happy. While it is not possible to just stop thinking, it is possible to manage your ruminating thoughts. Overthinking is natural. It's okay to have bad days, and you shouldn't beat yourself up for it. To manage your brain, you simply have to learn to identify when you're overthinking, and remember, it will never get you anywhere. Plain and simple, overthinking kills your happiness. If you find that your thoughts are the ones driving you, just remember, you're the one with the driver's license. Thank you.
Great job, Ananya. Up next, we have Meher Upadhyay, presenting Culture, a part of you you've yet to explore.
Every November comes a holiday that I look forward to all year. Let me set the scene. I put on a dress that weighs more than me, filled with shiny, sparkly beads and laced with threads handmade from 7,000 miles away. My arms are decorated with bracelets, and my face is dotted with my mom's makeup. I see hundreds of relatives, family, and friends. It seems like the entire country shows up in my living room. I'm sure we all have a special day we remember, a habit we do often, a place we visit, whatever it is. For me, it's been Diwali, a festival filled with lights, happiness, music, and so much food that I look like a balloon by the end of it. I celebrate this holiday because my family isn't originally from the United States. And I know I'm not alone. There are probably people in this audience whose culture is nothing like it is here. While there just as well could be people in this audience whose culture comes from right here in the town of Summit, New Jersey. But no matter who you are or where you're from, culture is in everyone, everywhere. And regardless of how insignificant you think your culture may be, these small aspects of your life can show you just how relevant it really is. To even begin to see culture in us, we have to understand what it is. According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, culture is the characteristic features of everyday existence, such as diversions or a way of life, shared by people in a place or time. In short, culture is the way you live your life. So instead of thinking of culture as a straight line, I'd like you to imagine it as more of a sphere, with no real sides, and its traits left to the perception of the person looking at it. To show you just how contrasting culture can be, I'm going to use my parents as an example. Both are not from America. Instead, they're from India. My mom is from New Delhi, and my dad is from Lucknow. Even though they both grew up in the exact same country, their lives were different. My maternal grandparents currently live in the same house my mom and uncle grew up in. While my dad's family in childhood moved around a lot. My dad likes sweets, while my mom favors salty food. Just like how your lives are different from your neighbors, or someone who lives in a different state, and more similar to people like your siblings. Sure, it's true, culture can differ between people. But when most think of culture, religion is often our first thought. And I'm going to be honest, before I started this whole process, it was mine too. And you're not wrong. Religion does play a major role in impacting our culture. Whether you go to church every Sunday, pray at a temple, or even just believe that a bigger person is watching over you, it can influence your values and customs and play a major or minor role in influencing your culture. Religion inspires art pieces that showcase faith and belief, and music featuring diverse styles and instruments. It also impacts traditions and festivals, from Christmas to Passover, Hanukkah to Dia de los Muertos, and St. Patrick's Day to Diwali, a festival deeply rooted in Hinduism, something my parents and grandparents practice passionately. One of my closest friends and multiple families I know of celebrate Christmas, but they don't believe in Halloween. But is religion the only thing that contributes to our culture? The food we eat and the way in which we sit down for a meal is also an essential part of our culture. Take Thanksgiving, for example. For some, this may be a familiar scene. You enter your dining room and see your entire family packed into one space. The food on the table smells like heaven, with enough to feed a tiny village. And of course, there's football, whether you watch or play. And when it's finally time to dig into those mashed potatoes you've been eyeing for the entire day, you do it with the love of knowing that you're surrounded by family, friends, and even that one aunt you don't know the name of, but for some reason remembers how big you've grown. But for some, Thanksgiving can just be a normal holiday or day. They may even celebrate it with a soccer ball and pizza instead. Even though the perspectives of this culture differ between people, it is the dishes and the people you love that make this specific holiday so special. Thus, we know food binds us together, just like a team or community of people. Humans travel to many different places, with cuisines being blended from different countries around the world. According to the SLO Food Bank, food is considered part of an intangible cultural heritage, a way of life passed down from generation to generation. And research from various sources studying the diversity of foodways report that your cultural background does impact what you eat. For some, spicy food may seem like a burst of flavors, while others will stick to something more plain. Or pineapple on pizza. Ugh. A debate that started with the Hawaiians and has made its way around the world as either an amazing or awful creation. But I don't think I truly understood the meaning of cultured food until I traveled to India last summer. And it was like entering my parents' world, seeing their childhoods and lives from my perspective. And even though I eat Indian food here in America, the rich spices and flavors made from the hands of my grandparents somehow made it taste even better. As for being passed down for generations, these were the same foods my mom ate growing up, same as my grandma and her mother in the same house they had lived in. The same can be said about you. Think of a childhood sweet, a snack you pack in your lunchbox, or even turkey and mashed potatoes over the dinner table, and know these things are what can shape your palate the most. Just like food, culture is also something that grows and changes over time, giving you a chance to explore it for yourself. For me and most of my family, it was Taekwondo, which was a recent part of my cultural experience. And that's how Grandmaster Yu's Summit Martial Arts kicked its way into my life. Get it? Kicked. Taekwondo. Anyway, my family and I signed up, and my brother loved it. And frankly, after a while, my mom and I did too. Taekwondo is not a sport normally advertised in the United States. Instead, its culture originates in South Korea. Master Yu and Mrs. Yu moved to the US from Korea and have been teaching Taekwondo as black belts since 2001. Not only is Master Yu part of the 0.05% of masters in the US and 1% of masters globally who teach Taekwondo at the level of an 8th degree black belt, but he also shared his skills and started Summit Martial Arts to coach people of all ages Taekwondo. As for me, it was so thrilling to kick so high and punch so hard. This is also how I met my masters. Masters are teachers in Taekwondo who aid you through the world of kicking, punching, disciplines, physical health, mental health, and much more. Over time, my family and I have gotten progressively closer to the sport and to the masters who have helped us, which was the goal of Master Yu and so many others who come to this country to share their culture. And as I continued, I realized that if not for his willingness to share the South Korean culture, me, my family, and many others would never have gotten to experience this life-changing sport. After this interview with Master Yu, I had an interesting thought. Both first and second generation immigrants can indeed have differences in their experiences and perspectives, but there are also similarities between the two. Both groups often face challenges in navigating and balancing their cultural heritage with American culture. As a second generation immigrant myself, helping me realize that both my American and Indian culture were part of me, and not two opposing players on a team, made me conclude that a so-called small part of your culture is actually what can shape it the most. You may not even think about it, but our cultural norms unconsciously affect how we interact with one another. Like the way we behave, which plays a major role in our daily life. My mom always says, how we act outside of our home is a big reflection of how we act in our home. That's why whenever we go somewhere, she ensures we're dressed appropriately and behave our best. Both cultural psychologists and social anthropologists agree that your cultural background does shape how you behave and socialize. For instance, in Japan, it's common for adults to work in one industry their entire lives, while in the US, people tend to switch jobs more frequently in pursuit of success. Similarly, in Brazil, greetings are usually warm, involving a hug or kiss on the cheek, while in the US, a simple handshake or hello is more common. Cultural norms are controlled by our environment. This is why culture is so important and different in so many of us. All these aspects of culture, from sports to food, religion to festivals and traditions, to even something as simple as everyday life, play some role in impacting your culture. Especially in places like the US, where many people from different backgrounds learn to appreciate their cultures through schools and work, giving future generations a way to feel that they're part of something bigger than themselves. So, when you step out of this auditorium, remember that no matter what, who, or where your culture is from, you should live knowing it's a part of what makes you special. If we all keep this in mind, we can create a world where culture, big or small, is not only accepted, but celebrated. Thank you.
Thank you, Meher. Our last speech of the evening, The Psychology of Success, will be presented by Charlotte Lemka.
You're the #1 ranked paddle tennis player in the country, about to serve the ball for a point that will determine who wins this year's national title. You're a world-renowned quarterback who needs to lead his team 83 yards with a mere 2:39 left on the clock to beat the undefeated New England Patriots in the Super Bowl. You're a golfer whose qualification for the prestigious Masters tournament comes down to whether this very putt sinks into the hole or misses it by less than a centimeter. Now stop. Think. What is going through your mind? Well, lucky for you, I know the answer. It was once wisely stated by baseball player Yogi Berra, 90% of the game is half mental. And while his proportions may have been slightly off, he was definitely onto something. Sports psychology is the study of how the mind influences the body during athletic performance, and it tries to identify ways for athletes to perform at their optimal level. As an intense athlete, I was always captivated by the idea of it, as if it contained some magnificent secret that only the best athletes were lucky enough to discover. But after spending the past year studying it, I learned that an athlete's mentality is no overnight fix. The key to success, not only in sports, but in all fields, is rather a lifelong journey of developing unbreakable self-belief. We'll start by exploring the path I took to grasp this concept. Then we'll venture into specific methods and insight that can fuel this confidence in daily environments, in the pre-competition stage, and during the actual competition. My life as an avid athlete started in 2nd grade when I joined my competitive dance team. But just this year, I took on competitive gymnastics. While perceived as similar, their environments differ heavily. At dance, you're just one member of a large team. But in gymnastics, it's every man for himself. You're on your own when you perform, when you're scored, and when you're placed at the podium. For a girl like me, who doesn't hope for, but strives for perfection, this climate of competition was eating me alive. My hunger to win morphed into a dangerous starvation. I forgot about the beautiful emotions I feel when I'm in action, because I was overpowered by paralyzing fear every time I thought about the fact that competition day was inching closer. But then something entered my life that changed it forever. A book, Dr. Nate Zinzer's The Confident Mind. In it lies a series of strategies, stories, and advice, helping the reader overcome the stress of competition. I was instantly able to connect Zinzer's every word to my own personal experience in the gym. The first techniques I learned could be incorporated on a day-to-day basis, meant for both in practice and after. Practice is the place for building not only physical, but mental strength as well. To fortify your confident mindset, you must flood it with positivity, mainly by creating positive memories. To maximize those moments resulting in success, the focus has to remain on the desired outcome. If I'm on the beam, I need to think about landing my skills, rather than not falling on my skills. Giving a negative idea like falling any attention whatsoever makes that outcome much more likely. Once you've mastered shifting that narrative, it's important to make the most of those reps. One of Dr. Zinzer's methods for this is an IPR, or immediate progress review, for after you complete a smaller section of a practice, workout, or workday. After I finish one of my 4 events, I mine out a gem or highlight from the work I just completed and carry it with me into the next task, to start off not only with a clean slate, but one tainted with positive energy. To solidify these memories back at home, I take out a notebook and write an E, S, and P in a vertical line. The E stands for effort, where I jot down a moment where I really gave my all. Next, the S for success, where I write about a time where I truly nailed something. And beside the P, meaning progress, I'll note where I saw improvement. Now, you may be asking, what happens to the less hot moments? If you just disregard mistakes, how will you learn from them? And you're right, in some ways. Criticizing yourself at practice can be a gateway to diminishing your overall confidence. But calmly analyzing, or even reframing your errors away from the action, is completely fine. Dr. Z helped me do this through nightly affirmations. For each area of weakness, I developed a reassuring statement His rules were that they had to be written in the first person, in the present tense, and with strictly positive, precise, and powerful language. At first, I struggled on vault, and every night wrote I'd confidently approach, attack, and explode from the vault table, then easily nail the landing. As I wrote it, I felt my body doing it, believing it was true. With optimistic training in the gym and consistent mental work outside of it, this affirmation soon became a reality. But all of this practice is directed towards a greater goal: to thrive on the battlefield, climb the podium's top step, and carry the trophy home. Getting to that point starts the minute your alarm shakes you awake on competition day. From that moment on, it's critical that you reach a state of complete acceptance. Accepting the fact that you've done enough. Through research and interviews, I scavenged for the perfect answer of how to get in your final preparation during the 11th hour. Yet the overwhelming consensus was as simple as knowing you're ready. Even so, when you enter the arena, butterflies are still bound to be released from their cocoons. That uncomfortable sensation is actually one you should readily embrace. When you're about to begin something that matters to you, your brain sends signals to prepare your body for action. One part it cues up is your adrenal glands, which pump adrenaline throughout your bloodstream, leading to the shaking hands, loud heartbeat, and sweaty palms. This activity triggers additional strength, speed, alertness, and perceptiveness. But whether or not you wish to take full advantage of this human superpower is a choice you have to make. You can either view it as your body freaking out and a major drawback, or see it for what it is, a natural performance enhancer. The latter perspective redefines those nerves as excitement, and instead includes a vision of everything going your way. Right before go time, there was another specific routine that Dr. Zinzer recommended. It consisted of telling yourself a motivating cue that encourages you to accomplish the task at hand. Then taking a series of deep, controlled breaths, and finally attaching your attention to a visual target to narrow your jumble of thoughts down to one focus. For me, this was great in instances where it came naturally, but I would sometimes manage to overcomplicate it. I became so set on discovering the one perfect thought that had to be going through my head in order for me to succeed that I ran into a cycle of overthinking. The truth is, the most beneficial headspace is the one with the least clutter, and there's more than one way to reach that point. I learned that no matter what was streaming through my mind, I was still vulnerable to human error, but judging my own thinking only made that outcome more likely. At this point, the buildup is over. The spotlight turns to you, and the crowd's eyes dig into your soul. The moment has come to perform. The most valuable advice I received for this portion of the day came from 3 athletes who know about high stakes better than anyone. Remember that paddle tennis player I told you about earlier? His name is Drew Broderick, and he has indeed been ranked number 1 in the nation. When I asked him what he does to perform his absolute best, he told me that he aims to be as serious in practice as he is in a real match, but as relaxed and free in a real match as he is in practice. Think about that for a second. His advice for dominating the competition was not to lock in, but to loosen up. And there's science to prove that he's completely right. Cautious, analytical thinking in the midst of performance tampers with the mind's unconscious proficiency. Focusing on technicality and mechanics is fine when practicing a single skill, but it's most effective to allow the delayed returns of practice to take over when performing a more difficult series. My best performances were the ones where my mind felt light and wasn't overtaken with internal voices. Second in line comes Super Bowl legend Eli Manning, who interestingly enough worked with Dr. Zinser for over a decade. During our interview, I asked him how he managed to perform so well in situations where the outcome of a game was entirely on his shoulders. His response blew my mind. He said, "Those are the moments you think about growing up as a kid. When you're playing in the backyard and your mom gives you a 2-minute warning before dinner. You pretend the game is tied and the clock is ticking in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl, and everything comes down to those last few seconds. Those are the moments you get excited for, the moments you crave. And when they come, all you're thinking is, this is where I want to be." He treated every history-defining play as the equivalent of a pee-wee football scrimmage. Not a petrifying moment, just something he loved to do and was good at. But amateur golfer and 4-time Walker Cup champ Stuart Hagestad helped me understand that to reach that point takes time. He said if he could tell his younger self anything, it would be not to concern himself with ranking. To get out there and learn how to win, whether he was at his best or not. Because the more times you make yourself uncomfortable, the easier it will get. While nerves are still inevitable, you'll learn to understand that the outcome of a competition won't alter your life. I was fascinated to see how Stu's bright, glass-half-full attitude did nothing to detract from his intensity as an athlete. His healthy relationship with competing clearly only propels his victories. Despite everyone urging me to adopt this almost careless approach, throughout the season, I found it difficult to maintain on competition day. I prepare for a difficult skill, and instead of reaching for, demanded perfection, clouding my mind's ability to subconsciously execute. Then, when met by failure, I couldn't move forward smiling like I didn't care, because I did. But when I kept a frown plastered on, the result was only more mistakes. 5 meets went by, filled with a mixture of ups and downs. I was using Zinser's strategies, but just wasn't fully embracing the general approach. But Stu was right. I started getting used to being in uncomfortable situations and navigating how to succeed in them. With a month before my final state championship, I reached out to Dr. Zinser himself and was able to meet with him. Together, we set out a plan. I had put in the work and the reps. It was now time to trust myself. He encouraged me to envision the meet every night, picturing the noise of the crowd, the texture of my leotard, the beat of my heart. Then, imagining myself executing everything flawlessly. When April 28th arrived, I had watched myself win countless times. But now, I had to make those dreams a reality. And to do that, I had to let go. My mantra that whole day was simply go for it. And the feeling of relief, joy, and triumph when I did was the one thing I couldn't have envisioned. But my journey doesn't end here. Confidence needs to be constantly sustained, and every day is another opportunity to do so. Think about the weeks ahead of you. Is there a big game, meeting, or audition on your agenda? Because while you may not have the time to sit down and scribble down months worth of affirming phrases, you can still give yourself the best possible chance at success by going into it with not even a belief, but the knowledge that you are going to nail it. Thank you.
Great job, Charlotte, and congratulations to all of our presenters. You have all done a wonderful job, and we hope you feel a sense of pride. On behalf of your TEDx staff, we thank everyone for coming out tonight and wish you all a safe trip home. Thank you.